Thank you everyone for joining. We'll be trying to go through the entire setup and understanding of the total comp and RSU dashboard. My goal for this today is that everyone can end the time with a fully functioning dashboard. So that's a goal. I'm hoping that that is achievable. If you go to FAANGFIRE.com, what would be helpful to start is having a fresh copy of the RSU and total comp dashboard ready to go. If you go to FAANGFIRE.com, click on tools on the top, the first link within there, there should be a button that says make your own copy. And you'll be able to make your own copy of the dashboard. So when we're going through, we'll be able to have you follow along step by step. So we'll end with everyone having their own dash. Awesome. For those that don't know, my name's Andre. I've been in tech for around 15 years. I was at Meta for 9.5 years, married to another tech worker. They are over at Uber. So I have experience with Meta RSUs, Uber RSUs, pre-IPO, all kinds of fun stuff, ESPPs, all of that stuff. I live in San Francisco. I have a 5-year-old. I consider myself like fired-ish right now. My partner's still working, so I feel like it would be ridiculous to say I'm fire. I'll just say stay-at-home parent with a child in elementary school, which is the best time to be a stay-at-home parent. Highly recommend that setup if you are able to do that. And my goal with all of this is to just help other people learn what I figured out myself going along. I felt like there was a lot that wasn't tailored specifically towards high earners working in tech, or that they were shaming us for earning a lot of money and not understanding the basics of how our compensation works. And I thought that was ridiculous because just because you earn a lot of money doesn't mean you know what to do with it. So I kind of went through all this myself for my own learnings, and this is all just sharing that back with you. And all of these dashboards are things I created for myself and then kind of cleaned up a little bit so other people are able to use them. And as part of the onboarding, I had people ask some questions if they had some. So this is just a quick overview of some of the questions that kind of came in. I'll try to get to all of these questions at the very end, but I wanted to start with kind of that first one because I thought it was a good job of setting up what this dashboard is even for. So the first question is, as someone that's new to RSUs, can you explain what you meant when you said, with Meta and Uber RSUs constantly moving, I didn't know what my overall compensation was. Why and how are RSUs constantly moving? So as you advance in your career within tech, especially within FAANG companies, your RSUs are restricted stock that you get both on when you're starting and then oftentimes annually or other times will end up making a large portion of your overall compensation. Early on, it might not be a huge percent, but then later on, it could be definitely more than 50 to 80% of your overall compensation package, all from the restricted stock units that you get. Now, the key thing of the restricted stock units, it's actual company stock that vests over time. So when the company that you work at, their stock changes, that means the value of those stock also fluctuates. So when I'm saying here that my total compensation was constantly moving because Meta and Uber's RSUs were constantly moving, that's exactly what I mean. Just the value of the shares were constantly changing, which was causing me to never really know how much I was earning or how much I made, or even just to expect for the rest of the year, how much income I was kind of coming in. So that was the overall intent of the dashboard and kind of why it was created. So first, everyone should have a version of this dashboard kind of open. So this is a fresh copy. I went through the same exact link that you all have. And what I wanted to do now is just kind of quickly walk through the different sections, explain how they work, and then we'll go through and show you with some real data that a few people have sent in how to actually update it. This is the default view. I entitled it the total compensation. So what this view has is both for last year and then going into future years, all of your expected earnings. So base salary, this is just how much, what your salary is, your base salary is. The bonus, all this is your inputted bonus information. In the sheet, you can kind of see it's hard coded in at 15%. So if you are a higher level or you know your specific bonus percent or your company calculates things a little bit differently, the first thing that you would want to do is also adjust the bonus percent. And then the real power behind a lot of this is this RSU column. It's a complicated calculation, but essentially it's looking at all of your future RSUs for the entire year and looking at today's price of the stock that you have RSUs in. So that's kind of it at a high level. So this table here is just showing your overall total compensation. So this will be live and always updating based on the current price of the stock. So as you're looking at this throughout the day, this will be changing. If you look at it one day to the next, it will always be current and updated using Google Finance's data for the stock. The visualization on the right is last year's and then this year's total compensation broken out by those three buckets. In the far right, it's pulling in your next four vests that you have. This is all simulated data currently of a hypothetical new grad who has four vests, Meta vests quarterly. If you were at somewhere like Uber, you would see a vest every single month, and other companies do different things in between then. And then below here is this monthly compensation. All this is broken down the yearly salaries and broken it down by month. Some of the key distinctions that you'll want to customize here is if you get paid on a different schedule than Google and Meta. Google and Meta are paid bi-weekly. And as a funny result of being paid bi-weekly, there's 26 pay periods in a year. That results in having 2 months, which are called triple paycheck months. So you could see for 2024, if you're on the same schedule as Meta and Google, March and August are the magical triple paycheck months. So if you look at the formula here, all it is doing is taking your base salary from B11, or it should actually be B12. So this is a good thing where I'll fix that live later on. But you could see this is just taking that and multiplying it times 3. So we'll actually even fix that now. So if you're having your own version, you can kind of see, hey, it looks like the monthly data is actually pulling in the wrong year. Going in and changing this to a 12 is going to instantly, if we pull it all the way down, all of a sudden we lose the triple paycheck. So now this is the same as getting paid twice a month. So we would need to go back through and fix the triple paychecks. So that's in March and in August if you're on Meta's and Google's bi-weekly pay period. And then another thing that's specific to Meta is the month that the bonus lands. Right now it's set to March, which is when Meta's bonuses typically land, and that's then will be reflected in the monthly compensation. So that is how that works. And then some of the visualizations in the bottom are just going deeper into your overall RSU vests that are coming up. This should be all available data of the information that you input, and I'll show you how to do that. And then this is, if you added in additional information about your grants, it will have it based on this breakdown of all of your vests by grant. So here you can kind of see I have 3 different vesting tranches added. So one was the new hire grant, a 2022 refresher, and then a 2023 refresher. And you can kind of see how that goes over the year, and you kind of see like a little bit of a 4-year cliff once the new grad grant kind of falls off. All right, so that's the main total compensation dashboard. The secondary dashboard is all about your RSUs. So this will be a view of all of your currently unvested RSUs and a view of the past RSUs. So this item in the top should be the number of unvested RSUs that you have. So it should be the number of shares, which is based on your data, and the current value, which is based on the current price of Meta in this case. So it's Meta, the current price of Meta is at $3.59, and the calculations are automatically looking at that. And you can see here, again, just getting more insight and understanding into your vests, both past and future. These are the upcoming vests that you have. And then over here are the prior vests. One understanding here is on the value at vest for prior vests. The way that the dashboard works is all future vests will be valued based on the current price today. If you're looking at past vests, the value is based on the price on the day of vesting. So there's a little bit of differences going on like what is the value of your vest. For example, these are all 60 share vests, but the one that vested in November was worth 19,000, and then the one vested in of 5/15/23 it was 14,000. So you can kind of see, even though the number of shares is the same, the value of those shares can drastically change over time. And even now, that 14,000 is now 21,000 just for those 60 shares. And again, you can kind of see a few different views of that same information just to give you more understanding of how your RSUs values are kind of coming in. And here's kind of just a simple view based on if you wanted to add your tax rate to have a better understanding of how many RSUs you'll be earning or having after taxes. This is an overly simplified way to look at it. The way that I was using this was based off trying to understand how much money would actually end up in my Charles Schwab vesting account every single vest. So what I did there was just look at my last vest and see what percent of my RSUs actually landed. So there will always be some RSUs that are automatically sold for taxes, both federal, state, and different Medicare, Medicaid taxes that are pulled out. And I would use that rate. So this isn't exactly looking at taxes, but it's more of a trying to estimate a reflection of how much income can you be expecting after taxes, if you will. And so that is that tab. We'll jump over to the tax aware one. This should be the same information. It's just kind of looking a little bit deeper on those specific 45% tax bracket in this case. And you can kind of estimate, you can edit that based on your specific circumstances. A future version of this dashboard, hopefully will go a little bit deeper into the tax side of things. I just wanted to keep it a little bit simpler to start with. And then finally, we have a hold versus diversify tab. This tab is purely because I was curious what the answer to the question was. What was the difference between selling on every vest, which was my strategy? My strategy has always been to sell my vests entirely, sell my RSUs after every single vest, and then diversify into something. In this case, I was using VTSAX or VTI, which is just Vanguard's total stock market fund, a low fee index fund that tries mimicking the whole overall US market. So this tab is trying to answer the question of what is the difference between selling every vest and buying a diversified portfolio, or just holding on. So diamond hands in this case as a joke, because I think I created this originally during a peak Bitcoin bull run. So you can kind of see how this dashboard changes over time. This is just looking at the value of your vest for both of those situations. Awesome. Okay, so then now let's get to what you guys all came here for, is actually personalizing and customizing it yourself. The bulk of the dashboard is all powered by this tab called Insert Data Here. And the formatting that you need to have the data in is the vesting date, the shares granted. I'm not actually using this column, so the date granted. This is something that I was planning on using in a future version. And then the last column that's needed here is the vest description, which is just trying to give you more insight into each grant. So in this case, I have the new hire grant, a few refreshers in year 2. And I'll show you how to copy this information. And then finally, you have the stock ticker column. This is just automatically populated based on what you enter in 11. I added this column to be visible because people were pasting over it and not realizing it. So now having it visible, if you needed to change it or were breaking the column or breaking the dashboard, oftentimes it was because the stock ticker tab was getting overridden. This is also very useful if you're in a household that has multiple workers that work at different companies. You can actually paste both of your RSUs into the single dashboard. Just make sure to update the stock ticker hard coded into that E column. All the comparisons won't work in the hold versus diversify, but all of the other compensation stuff should work. So for me, I had a household version of this dashboard that included both my Meta shares as well as my partner's Uber shares. So I could constantly have the data updated for both of our stock instead of having to have 2 separate dashboards. Okay, so how do you get this data? So if you have the post open, which I linked to in the meeting comments, otherwise you can go to FAANGFIRE.com and click on the first post. This is the one of the more important pieces of information, because if you don't have your RSU data, the dashboard doesn't really work. So how do you get this data? So I have 2 examples here for if you work at somewhere like Meta who uses Schwab, or if you work at somewhere like Uber that uses Solium or ShareWorks, how to get that information. But regardless of where you work, your broker should be able to, wherever your RSUs live, this information should be available. So specifically for Schwab, you can easily access that by going to Schwab Equity Awards. And I'll paste this one specifically because I know there's a lot of Meta folks in the call. I'll go ahead and paste this in to the comments just as a quick shortcut of how to access your equity information. One important thing is you'll want to make sure to check a box that says show all historical awards. If you don't have that box checked, it will only show you future unvested shares, and it won't be useful for looking at past vests, which are one of the key benefits for the dashboard. And then after that, there's going to be an export button in the top right. and you'll end up with a CSV document. The CSV document looks like this. And I'm going to walk through a specific example in a second of how to actually use this data and input it over. And if you have, if you work somewhere like Uber and use the Solium, it's a little bit more complicated. You have to physically click into every single grant and then copy and paste the information. I have the steps available on the website as well. Okay, so with that, let's actually go in and go through a live example. So someone was very gracious and shared with me their data. And this is basically an example of what I would talk to when I'm talking to someone and helping them set up themselves, what information I would ask for them. So I'm going to bounce around a little bit, so hopefully people don't get too dizzy. So here we have the RSU data dump, as well as some basic information I have that was needed to input historical data. So what I asked for people were, what was your salary and your bonus information from your last paycheck of 2023? Just so we can have some historical data going in there too. So they provided that information. So we'll go ahead and take that information and paste it into that total compensation sheet. So this is using last year's information. So we're pasting in the base salary. This is actual data that they had from last year. Next, we're pasting in the bonus. And this is all from the last pay stub of the year. So this is going to be hard coded. And then everything else from here on out will be a little bit more formulaic. So then now we have current base salary, as well as what is the bonus percent for this person. So this person bonus percent is 15%. So we'll go through that total compensation dashboard again. And then now going forward in row B12, we'll update that with the current base information. And what I like to do is just assume you're never going to get a raise again, and then just copy and keep your same base salary going forward. Obviously, that's not true, but it's an easy, simple assumption to make. So if you're someone that's a little bit more confident and you want to factor in future raises, you're kind of able to manually do that. Another thing to note is many people get raises throughout the year, and then you can manually adjust the salary based on that. Just know that you'll want to edit the monthly salary based on when you get the raise in your future months. So again, right now, all we have is actual salary data and then historical bonus information. And again, this is just calculating by 15% of the base salary. And then now, again, going into the RSU data. So we have all of these. This is the raw CSV of what it looks like for Meta workers. So we have the vest date, the number of shares, and then the award date. So let's look again at the insert data here tab to see what format we're wanting. So the format we're wanting is vest date, shares granted, date granted, and then vest description. So just to keep things a little bit easier, I'm just going to paste this randomly here so I have that as a reference. So I know I'm going to want the vest date. I know I'm going to want shares granted. I know I'm going to want the date they were granted, and then the vest description. So each of these buckets is a different vest that this person had. So a different grant that they received. In most cases, the first grant will be their new hire grant, and then future grants will be refreshers kind of coming in. So the way that I set it up to get things in this format, date granted, date description, all I'll do is copy over the award date here, and then just write a quick description. So here I'm going to say new hire grant, just because I know for most Meta employees, this first grant is going to be their new hire grant. And I'll just paste that down. So then now I'll have all of this vest information available for that first grant. And I'm going to repeat that going down for each of these. And we'll actually do that live. So really quick to kind of see how it is and also give everyone else some time to go through the same exercise. So again, here, this is now it was awarded on the 2021. So I'm going to call this like 2021 refresher. And paste that same thing down. And we're going to repeat that again here. This one was granted in 2022. We're going to call that 2022 refresher. And you guys all get to pretend to be data analysts today if you are not one. A lot of the job is all around cleaning up data and formatting it in the way that you want it. So here we have 2023, calling it 2023 refresher, which is also a very good call out that this current document as is doesn't assume anything about your future vests. So if you were expecting a new vest coming in for 2024, that's not baked in here. We could talk about it at the end, what I would do to customize that. Okay, so assuming everyone gets to this step where, hey, we have all the data in the columns that we need, how do I now copy and paste it in? Again, like, I'm just going to be very quick. I'm going to just delete the rows that I don't need anymore, just so I can get into one simple place to copy and paste at a single time. So I'm just cleaning up and deleting everything, and there's definitely an easier way to do this. And in the future, I hope you guys don't have to do any of this manual entry, but this is what it is right now. Okay, so we have all of that data here. We're going to copy that, go to the Insert Data Here tab, and if everything works correctly, so we'll look again, let's look before we paste it in to see. Right now it's saying the total compensation is 297, or 255, 297, and if we update the information, we should have a more accurate reflection of the thing. Okay, so now those updated down. So now it's the 234 and 274. So you can kind of see now we have real data of this person's vests as well as their historical RSU vests in the past. So you can kind of see their new hire grant. And then in 2021, you can also see, hey, their 2022 refresher, or sorry, 2021 refresher was rather small. So that's clear that they joined Meta later in the year in 2020 or whatever, their first year. So their first refresher was smaller than their normal refresher because it was prorated based on the amount of time that they were at the company. And then you can kind of see all of their future vests. And then when they come back into this dashboard in March with their new information, they can update the actual bonus information, as well as all you need to do is add in your latest vest in here, and it will automatically update all of this information for that person to better understand their compensation and their grants. All of that will automatically update. And you kind of have a clear understanding now over the year of how much you're going to be earning and how that generally flows based on the current price of the company stock. So I'm going to go through this again with another example. It's also a meta example, so it will be very similar. So if you're still going through and wanting to follow along again, this will be a good chance. So here we have, again, the same thing I'm doing. All I do when I'm starting in one of these new sheets is I need the award date in this column, and then new hire grants is what I always start any meta RSU sheets will start with that. Again, here, really simple, just a lot of copy and pasting. And this is 2023 refresher. Copy and paste that down. This one is simple because this is someone who joined in 2022, and all they have is a one partial year refresher. So this will be a good example of someone that joined early in 2022, kind of what the impact of their refreshers are. One thing to look out for, if you don't have as many vests, just make sure you delete out some of the old data, just because there might be some phantom data in the document. Okay, and now we can kind of see, again, the same person. All they have is their new hire grant and a small refresher because they joined probably in one of the later months of the year. And we also haven't updated the base salary and bonus. So we could do that really quick too. They told me their salary for last year was 210. And their bonus was 4,600. Again, because they were only here for some of the year, they only have a partial year bonus. And Meta people had a smaller bonus last year too, just because they transitioned from a twice a year bonus to an annual bonus. And as part of the transition, just the bonus payouts were smaller last year. Okay, and then here again, remember I had the bug where I was actually looking at 2023's data. So again, here I'm just going to update it to B12, copy that down, update the triple paycheck months. So all it is doing is dividing it by the salary by the number of pay stubs, which is 26. And in this case, I need those 2 months where they're earning 3 pay stubs. Okay. And then now we have all this person's total comp. You can see their 2023 comp was around 530. Their expected comp now for next year, based on today's stock price, is 677. So it's really important. Again, it changes a lot based on the current price of the stock. You can see this is someone who's more than 50% of their salary comes from their RSUs. And that it makes it even more important to understand how the changes in Meta stock determine their overall compensation. And you kind of see here kind of like the difference. So Meta's outperformed the overall market by 23% over the time that they've had vests. Again, just use this tab as more of a, this is interesting. I don't think you should make any investment decisions or holding decisions based on past data. It is a very skewed view of the world. So we just went through setting up two different ones, both meta examples. So it was a little bit more streamlined. If you work at someone that uses Solium, there's a little bit more data massaging that's needed. And I kind of talked through it a little bit in the post. Okay, awesome. Devella, go ahead and unmute yourself and you can answer your question.
Hi. So just a quick question. If I have stock from multiple companies, I can just plug it in. The only thing that wouldn't work is the hold versus diversify tab.
Correct. Are you talking about from past jobs?
Yeah.
So it should, the hold and diversify tab will not work, but the other information should work. So that brings up a good point. And what you can do is, if you're really curious how the sheet works, you can access all of the hidden tabs. So these are a lot of really janky hidden sheets that are here that have different calculations of how it's actually being powered. And it breaks things pretty often. If you correctly set up the insert data here tab and hard code in within the stock ticker your new company's stock or your other company's stocks correctly and have it mapped up, everything should correctly calculate over. So we can do a quick validation in one of these. So let's just go ahead and change the insert data here tab. Let's just change this one to, I don't know, say there was like a few grants from Tesla just randomly thrown in here. And I will confirm now live whether those populate over here. And yeah, you can see the Tesla data is correctly populating and pulling into the other documents that kind of power everything else. So that is exactly all you would need to do if you're wanting to have an accurate reflection of past compensation. And here again, like this, the past data is all for, like right now we're only looking at 1 year. If you wanted to personalize this and look at a full record of your salary, you can just add in rows here. You'll have to modify the formulas a little bit. I think the RSU formula is actually relatively simple. This looks complicated, but all it is looking at, the most important thing is, it's basically just looking at the year and looking at all of your vests that are in that same year. So all this stuff looks complicated, but just know that it's saying like, hey, find all of the RSUs that vested in whatever year is in column A and sum those within there. So if you add any columns up here, you should be able to copy and paste this field and get all of your past data too if you wanted more data beyond or prior to 2023. And we did have a few questions that we can also go to. And one of them was asked here was, maybe it didn't add here, but like what were the changes? Maybe I deleted it. The question was, what is different this year in the dashboard versus last year? There's actually very little different. A lot of it is mostly visual, along with the addition of maintaining the prior year's income information. Past dashboards started in the current year. So this one was a first attempt of, hey, let me start adding in historical data. Over time, I have a few personal dashboards that I use. One is tracking my overall salary, like throughout my entire career. Much of that didn't include any RSUs. And there's different, like also looking at my base salary versus like how much I actually earned and looking at those comparisons. Like, so there's a future world where it incorporates a little bit more of the historical data to give a clear picture. Awesome. Okay, so we have a few questions. Go ahead and unmute if you want to go first, and then Jonathan, you can go after.
Hey, Andre. First of all, thanks a lot for this session. This really great hands-on. So I had a question about the total comp that is shown here. So is this total compensation before taxes or after taxes? Like usually when RSUs vest, like they give an option to hold RSUs for taxes.
Yep.
So is this like post that or pre?
Yeah, this total compensation is pre-tax. So this should be like relatively close to your like what you would see if you were looking at your overall income before taxes were taken out. It's going to be a little bit different. So if you're for example like looking at your like W-2 and you're like, hey, like this number doesn't match up. It's not perfect. The value that the RSUs is using, it's using like the value and the date and exactly when your RSUs vest, it might be slightly different. But again, this is all pre-tax. There's a soft version in the tax aware tab that tries to control for that, where you can modify the estimated tax rate based on whatever percent of stock gets auto sold for your taxes. I don't have this incorporated into the total compensation, mostly because I didn't want to hard code every single state's tax brackets within here. So it got a little bit messy. I'm hoping to at least be able to do a version of that for at least like, I don't know, California, New York, and then the states with no state income tax. I think that will cover many of the bases. But again, so all this total compensation, both in the base salary and RSUs, doesn't factor in taxes at all.
Great, thank you. And just one more quick question. So I believe in March they grant more in Meta. They grant more stocks. So refresher. So this assumes certain RSUs will be granted, or you have to go back and plug those numbers in once you get those.
Yeah, great question. So this assumes nothing. There's no future grants coming in here, which is actually a really good call out because, hey, like your actual 2024, if you work at somewhere like Meta, the number is not accurate because it doesn't include your most recent vest. And somewhere like Meta is, once you receive new stock, they start vesting immediately the next quarter. So in some places have a year cliff before the first vest happens. Now more and more companies aren't having that, and they can start vesting as soon as a month in the case of somewhere like Uber, or even like a quarter. So this doesn't have future vests in it. That's, I was saying in one of the if you're wanting to add that, I would just simulate what you think the amount would be and add it in within the insert data here tab. I would make sure that you describe it as a like estimate. And the way that I would calculate that is, in most cases, it's all very formulaic, like what your refresher would be. Just assume like, hey, I'm gonna get a meets all at my job title, at my level, this is the expected amount of refreshers that I would get. And you can hard code those amounts in based on just current stock price today. And maybe that's something I've done that for some people where it's just the assumption is built into the dashboard and it will always update based on the current stock price. So for example, let's say like, hey, I know my refresher is going to be $200,000, but it's $200,000 based on whatever the stock price is on March 1st. So what you can do is hard code this in where it's always going to be $200,000 based on the current stock price. And then when you actually get the real vest, you can just modify that based on the real information. So that's what I would do if you were wanting to do that. It also brings up a good point too, where there's a version of this dashboard in the future potentially that factors in all future refreshers to give you a better reflection of what your actual total comp in the future will be, because it's very clear. You can be like, hey, like these are all underestimates because they don't include refreshers. And if you work at somewhere like Meta, then maybe you can be a little bit more confident in what the refresher could be in the future. I like to take the stance of like somewhere in between, like where it's like, hey, you can have some assumptions, but I also don't try to predict the future. The way that they handle refreshers can always change. So having this dashboard reflect reality of what it currently is today is kind of the best attempt of what my intent was originally. But if you're a little bit more confident than me, you can go in and modify those however you'd like.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for answering these.
Absolutely. Awesome. Jonathan, what was your...
Yeah, my question was around, most of it seems to be unvested RSUs. Is there any point here where it's like vested RSUs and totals there? I couldn't see.
In the RSU dashboard, it will give you all upcoming, okay, it actually, all RSU data. Yeah, okay, here we go. So these are the upcoming ones, like you said, like this is just future looking. These two columns over here, these two charts, the annual RSU value by grant, an annual RSU value overall. These ones will both be the total RSUs by year. And if you were wanting the data for all past RSUs, the data's in the document. You can see it's kind of pulling it over here. These are the values of the last 4 prior vests. You can, if you wanted more than that, you can actually probably see what this formula is doing and just kind of like paste it down. Honestly, it looks like a very lazy formula where I'm just sorting the column and then actually just counting the number of rows. Yeah. So if you wanted to, you can probably just like paste this down to get a more vest by vest view. And let me see, I believe in the hold versus diversify, you also have the every single vest. So this one also has all of your past vests. Every single vest would be reflected in that tab. So if you cared about other things, like most of the different views are here, you can like easily copy and paste, like, hey, I really want to have this view in this other tab. Like you would just simply just like, hey, I want to have that here, copy that, go over here, paste it in. And then now this dashboard is yours, personalized, customized, and it will correctly show you exactly what you care about.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other dashboard specific questions? And I also have some of these other questions that we can get to. Awesome. Ming asked, if you wanted to, okay, how do you extend the spreadsheet beyond 4 years for someone who has worked 5 to 10 years and wants to track their full historical data? What I would do is, if you wanted more historical data, I would just add in the columns over here, like just literally add in a few, like, let's see, it has some warnings in here to like, if I think you're gonna break something, it like might mess with the formatting, but let's say here you cared about like 2022, 2021, and you can just kind of like modify all this information up. This formula should work if I pull it up. Okay. Yeah, and it's showing like, okay, this person has been at Meta for a while, so we have more of the historical data. Let me just make sure. Yeah, 2021. Okay, so I'm not making stuff up. So we'll have more historical data if they care about seeing that in the tab. You would just add those rows above there, fill in the date, and then update your base salary. I would use real data that you have for base salary and bonus and update those. We can answer a couple of these questions here. So one person had they wanted to learn more about how to better manage their RSUs and understand the tax implications to determine the best time to cash out. So here I have like again, not a financial advisor. This is all like informational only, but I like to make sure that people understand like how taxes work with our RSUs. So for those that don't know, the way that taxes work on RSUs is you are taxed on the value at vest. So whenever your RSUs vest, the amount of the total vest, let's say it's $100,000, is viewed as income from the IRS perspective. So you actually, if you logged into your payroll provider, you would see a line item in your pay stub that says like, hey, like $100,000 of income. Now you might be confused, like, hey, like it says $100,000 of income, and I already paid taxes on it, but when I did my taxes at the end of the year, I still owed like $20,000 or something like that, which is a very common scenario for many tech workers. So there's a difference between like how much is taxed on vest, which is withheld. It's called withholding. So how much is sold automatically for tax withholdings, and then what your actual taxes are. RSUs are income. They're taxed the exact same thing as income. The amount that they're withheld can be different. If you're at somewhere like Meta, you can modify the exact amount that's withheld to be more accurate and lead you to have less of a large tax bill. I have a post specific on that. It's a little bit nuanced, but that's a like high level TLDR on taxes. The way RSU taxes work is on vest, they're treated as income. Now, if you didn't sell and you're planning on selling, now you're already taxed on the income. So if you sell right away, there's no additional taxes because the value on vest and the value when you're selling it, it's the same. So there's no gain. The way that capital gains tax work in the US is if there is a gain, which is the difference in the value from when it vested and then when you sold, you will then owe taxes only on the gain. So if it was $100,000 on vest and then it increased to $110,000 when you sold, that $10,000 is what you owe taxes on. And then how much that tax is depends on whether you've held the stock for less than 1 year or more than 1 year. If it's less than 1 year, it's just going to get treated pretty much like income. It's going to be taxed at your normal tax rate as if it was income. So if you're a high earner in California, that could be in like the mid 30s plus California taxes on top of that. If you hold longer than 1 year, they'll get taxed at long-term capital gains. For most people reading this will end up being in like the 15 to 20% range. So that is the difference there. But again, the key thing to remember for taxes is if you sell on vest, there's no additional taxes, only the difference between if there's a gain between when you vested and sold. So for me, my strategy was always every single time I got a new vest, I would just sell and diversify. I felt like I had enough concentration within Meta based on my job, as well as I'll take advantage of all stock increases from future vests. Obviously, sometimes that's more advantageous, sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. But it was less around trying to get the best returns and more around mitigating risk and not trying to hit home runs when I don't need to. I didn't need to rely on Meta doubling in a year to hit my goals. My goals were always trying to match the overall market performance. And again, if Meta went up while I was working there, no longer there, I would still take advantage of all of the upside in the form of future grants. So that is my view on that very high level, like how to think about RSUs. I also have a post kind of detailing some different strategies. The biggest thing that I would encourage you to is like come up with a plan of how to approach it and try sticking to it. For example, let's say like many times financial advisors will warn people against having all of their eggs in one basket. So like, what does that mean practically? It's like, if you have more than like 5 to 10% of your overall net worth in a single company, that would be viewed as like a highly concentrated position, which is fine. Like 10% is could be reasonable based on your own risk tolerance. But if you're like, I would say like, hey, what is your percent? And figure that out and actually write it down. And then in the future, if the stock goes up, try holding yourself to maintaining that 10%. And that will help you be a little bit more disciplined and not as reactionary, because it's very easy to fall into the trap of like the momentum of like, oh, the stock just doubled, I better not sell because it's going to happen again in the future. Like our brains are all wired to have such extreme recency bias that writing it down and trying to stick to a plan ahead of time will just kind of save you from yourself more than anything. And okay, other questions. We'll do specific ones to the tools, and I'll answer general ones. Potentially covering inserting ESPP data into the tool. So ESPP is Employee Stock Purchase Plan. I didn't add that. Meta doesn't have an ESPP. Uber does. So it is a good call out to add, particularly because it can definitely have drastic impacts on your overall compensation. The way that the ESPPs work is you can contribute up to like $25,000 per year, and oftentimes will be a discount. Uber's, for example, is a 15% discount on the price, but it also has a look back window. So what ended up happening last year was like the like $25,000 essentially turned into like $40,000 just through the ESPP. I didn't include that here just because ESPPs are, the way that they're calculated, are a little bit complex. Even that $25,000, it's $25,000 like in value at the amount that like of the look back window. So for example, it was $25,000, but maybe because Uber increased so much, you could actually only buy like $12,000. And that sounds confusing, me even just saying it out loud. So it was too confusing to input into the sheet, as well as just overall kind of how that's handled is a little bit more complex. But it's a good point. If I would definitely be interested in someone figuring out a way to hack around the ESPP data directly in there. Thanks, Rob. The next question was around front loading versus spreading retirement investments throughout the year. So this is a good one. I recently posted what my specific inputs for my 401k were last year. Don't have a 401k this year, but last year it included some high percents. Essentially, what I would do is front load all of my retirement savings, where for the first couple months of the year, I'd have $0 paychecks. This is all just because I thought it was funny having $0 paychecks, and it forced me to be a little bit more rigorous in my own personal budgeting and understanding my money coming in. So it was a good forcing function. In theory, there's probably like a marginal benefit to front loading, like the overall, like if the market on average is increasing over time, having money in the market sooner should be better. Last year is a good example where that wasn't the case. We're talking again in a given year, it's going to be just a marginal difference. If you're more comfortable spreading it over the year versus front loading it, both are perfectly fine. Like we're talking about like fractions of a percent potential benefits from front loading versus any other strategy. I just liked front loading just because I liked also having it finished. It also was advantageous for me to do the same with my partner's 401k, because at Meta, if you're taking advantage of the mega backdoor, it all happens automatically. Like it automatically turns into a Roth 401k without having to do anything. At Uber, you have to physically call Fidelity and ask them to do the conversion, which is what you used to do at Meta, but no longer have to do anyway. It makes it easy. Fewer phone calls to Fidelity to have to talk to an actual person was what I was kind of optimizing for on the front loading there. Awesome. Okay, so that was that question. Any other questions for the people that are in the room? We have a few minutes left. I'm happy to answer any broad fire related questions, RSU questions, and anything in between. Awesome, Lee.
Yes, thank you. Quick question, like, is there any advantage of a Roth IRA versus a Roth 401k?
The way, that's a really good question. I need to make a deeper post on this topic. So Roth 401k and Roth IRA, like it would end up being similar. The way, but I think I would back up even more and think about the broader question when you're looking at your 401k and deciding first whether you should contribute to a traditional 401k, which is pre-tax, or a Roth 401k, which is post-tax. The key assumption that you're making there oftentimes is, what is my income taxes now, like the tax rates, and what is it going to be during retirement? So for me, particularly when I was mid-career and at a high salary, like my goal has always been to fire and retire early, as well as retire somewhere that's probably not California. So the way that I thought about it was, hey, like I'm earning a lot of money right now. I'm in California at a very high tax bracket. I'm planning on retiring in not California and not earning as much money versus working at Meta full time. In my mind, it was kind of clear, like, hey, I'm gonna earn less in retirement than I am now, so the tax bracket would be lower. So I would always contribute the max to the pre-tax. And again, that is, I think, like $23,000 that you're not paying taxes in this year. So let's say if you're in, we'll do live, 23,000 times, like, let's say you're in the 30% tax bracket, like that's already like almost $7,000 in tax savings this year if you were to do the pre-tax versus Roth. It could be a wash if it's more borderline. And then I think the question, if I was going in order of sequencing, I would also not go straight to a Roth IRA. Like it's easier to do the Roth 401k versus the Roth IRA if you're looking at those two options directly. There are some like additional protections that are afforded to 401ks versus IRAs, but it's a little bit more nuanced. Awesome. Okay. Delara, did you want to ask your question? Then I'll answer the question in the messaging after that.
Yeah, quick question. What's your fire number?
Yep. So I have a post on I have it called like my enough number, and my enough number. I'm working on another recent post. So this is 2022. I have one for 2024, and I have my overall approach of how I think about my overall enough number. And this is what I wrote in 2022. I kind of came up with around like, hey, like $4 million in addition to, I have some like funny assumptions in here. One of the big ones is like the house. So I don't own a house now. So in 2022, $600,000 seemed like a reasonable amount for a nice house in not California. Maybe that number is like way too low now. So it's a heavily influenced based on housing, but it's all baked on like my actual spend and calculating how much I actually need. And I was trying to simulate modeling out having $100,000 spend excluding housing. And that's kind of the way I thought about my enough number, which is a good post. I definitely encourage you to read, because I think the methodology is important versus the actual number and how you think about it. And then one question someone asked too after that was around, does this handle pre-IPO information? It does handle pre-IPO if you get RSUs. It will also send up, like I think I had insert data here. Let me see if we're running on time, but I'm going to change this to Uber. No, that's not gonna work. Like, okay, there's like a warning here that will like flag. That's like warning you own pre-IPO shares. Some historical data and buy versus diversified data will not be correct without adjustments. So there's some like caveats on the pre-IPO data. It doesn't handle options at all, stock options at all. I haven't dealt with those in a while, so I did all this based on like my own experience and what I knew intimately, and I wasn't as confident in my understanding of stock options to add it in. But it's a good call out, something that I'm like in a future version hoping to figure out how to solve. But if your pre-IPO items are like, if you have pre-IPO and your company did IPO, that works, because I solved that case for Uber where I had pre-IPO, my partner had pre-IPO shares, but again, it's all shares and it wasn't options, so it didn't have the requirement of needing to understand options versus like when to vest, so it didn't have that. So no options, yes for stock, but the value only works if the company's currently public. You'll have to there might be a way to modify it and hard code some of the data. Awesome. So we are at time. One quick plug at the end. So if you wanted to work one-on-one in January, I'm having one-on-one sessions with paid FAANG FIRE subscribers where we can book 20 minutes to kind of like walk through your dashboard and help you set it up or help you personalize it however you want. If you could support me, one, I give out everything I have for free as much as I can, but I definitely appreciate my paid Substack subscribers, but also appreciate if you just share the content that I put out as your friends and coworkers are having questions that come up. And then if you are interested in one-on-one fire coaching, I also do that in between spending my time fishing in San Francisco currently and then picking up my daughter from school. Awesome. So that is about an hour. So again, I hopefully everyone got through and we're able to successfully set up their dashboards. If you ran into issues, just shoot me a message. We can kind of debug a little bit. Or if you're wanting to set up time, I definitely have the options available there. So thanks again, everyone. And this will be recorded and I'll share that out probably later today.